네, 안녕하십니까. 이번 세션은 영어로 진행을 하겠습니다. So welcome everyone. Our theme today is a simple question. How can food go beyond just feeding us to become a bridge that connects people and cultures? And I think that question describes the life and work of our guest, Chef Edward Lee, aka Lee Kyun. Born in Korea, grew up in Brooklyn, trained in France, and spent more than 20 years in Kentucky. His story is as diverse as his cooking. Now, many of us here in Korea probably know him best from culinary class wars, where his humility, vulnerability, and also amazing creativity, tofu, anyone, really left a strong impression. But in the US, of course, he's very well known for acclaimed restaurants like 610 Magnolia, appearing on shows like Top Chef and Mind of a Chef, and also for his beautifully written books, such as Buttermilk Graffiti, which I have right here, which won the James Beard Award for Best Book in Writing in 2019. So through his food and his writing, he shows how cooking can tell stories, connect cultures, and really enrich our lives. So please give a warm welcome to Chef Edward Lee.
안녕하세요. 반갑습니다.
Oh, has your Korean improved?
조금.
All right.
공부하고 있어요. 열심히 공부하고 있어요. 네.
Yay. 참 잘하고 있습니다.
네.
You said before that if you want to get to know the culture, anything, you kind of have to eat the food. And in your book, you also say in the introduction, if you want to know someone, you have to eat what they eat. And in the culinary class wars, you said that you were a 비빔인간. Does that mean you've ate so many different cuisines, or what does that mean exactly? You kind of talked about it.
Yeah, it just means that, I have so many cultures inside me, that I've lived in. And I talk a lot about, sometimes I wish I was like 100% Korean or 100% American or 100% French or whatever. There are people who just have one identity, and sometimes I envy that because it is so comforting and assuring to just be that. And I guess my whole life, I've always kind of, am I Korean? Am I American? It's always going back and forth, and both a struggle, but also there is a kind of freedom in that. Like, I make kimchi, but I don't make it the same way as my mother or my grandmother, So they give me pass, They say, well, you don't make kimchi the right way, but you're not really Korean, so it's okay. And so there is some freedom that I have for that. But at the same time, the more time I spend in Korea, I feel like I'm understanding more. And I don't know if it's intellectual, but it just, in my heart, I feel more Korean. And I can't express what that means. It just, I can feel it. And that to me is something that I don't know what the process is. I don't know how to do it. But, sometimes when I make a Korean dish, Korean people will say to me, oh, that's delicious, but, it's not Korean food. And then sometimes I make something, because I don't make traditional Korean food, and a Korean person will say, that tastes Korean. And I don't know what's the difference, but they just say it's 느낌 있어요. 한국 느낌 있어요. And to me, I'm always trying to find or define what does that mean. But it's funny sometimes, even I was doing an event, I made like 보리차 ice cream, right? Which is not traditional at all. But the Korean person ate it and said, oh, that feels so Korean. And it's just a feeling. And I think that's what I'm kind of searching for, is what is part of my identity that makes me cook in Korean ingredients that feels authentic and feels natural.
maybe that's the difference between traditional and authentic. Maybe what you're cooking isn't traditional Korean, but you're taking traditional ingredients and putting your own dose of authenticity in it, and also unique creativity.
Yeah, but but I'm also doing things that are a little, like it's still fusion, right?
Yeah.
It's still different, but sometimes, and then sometimes I make them, they're like, "Ugh, that's weird."
I mean, I think the bibimbap reference was so layered. Like bibimbap is, you referred to yourself as a bibimingan, but of course, bibimbap being one of Korea's most famous dishes. And you said how it's a variety of ingredients, but when you mix it, it creates one flavor. And I think that describes a lot of Korean dishes. In the end, sometimes we just mix everything up, and that's the rice, the pap that we have. So I'm kind of curious. Korean cuisine has also evolved, especially in the past maybe 10 years where it's taken off globally. Could you define Korean cuisine? What do you think Korean cuisine is right now?
No, I can't define. I don't want to. That's a big question. I just know, in the same way, like in America, there's a lot of Korean fusion food, and even sometimes I taste something and I'm like, that doesn't really taste Korean, and I can't describe what that is. But I do think that there is something. It's not a flavor, but it's like Korean food is made with, like all food is made with love, but Korean food is made with like taking care of someone. It's a very important, like, eat because I want to take care of you. I want you to be healthy. I want you to feel good. I want you to be full. Like there's always this emotion behind it, and I think sometimes when I eat Korean food, and the ajumma is always like, here, have more, and I'm already full, but she's like, eat more, and to me that is something that is so, it's very important, and I think there is, I don't care if it's fancy food or food you get at Shijang, or it comes with that emotion. It feels like Korean to me. That it feels like a hug, and I think that's a lot of the time when I eat Korean food, that's the feeling I get. In America, so one of the things, we have a Korean restaurant in DC called Shia. It's a little tough, but one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to introduce Korean flavors to Americans that they haven't seen before. And in America now, Korean barbecue is so popular. It's everywhere. So everybody knows kalbi and bulgogi and kimchi and bibimbap. But they don't know what chotgal is, and they don't know suk, and they don't know omija, and they don't know all these other flavors. And so we have a menu at Shia where we say, we're not going to serve kalbi or bulgogi. We're not going to serve. We want to show, but also in a modern, innovative take, especially Korean seafood, because in America, when you say Korean food, we think barbecue, but Korea is a peninsula and it's surrounded by water. And when I'm in Korea, I eat so much seafood. And I always think, why don't we have more Korean seafood in America? So it's kind of my next ambition, is to introduce these different concepts and these different flavors to Americans, to say, like, this is, and also, I've been really exploring this idea of, Korean food as being 담백하다. Americans think all Korean food is spicy, and all Korean food is really garlic heavy. And I think, yes, of course, there's a lot of, beautiful spicy food in Korea, but I've been eating a lot of 담백한,
평양냉면 too?
Yeah. And it feels, there's something very like Korean about it. It's like very gentle, it's very subtle. It's mostly vegetarian. Comes from the mountains, and there's something like, you really have to the flavor doesn't punch you in the face. You have to be like quiet. You have to think about it, and you have to like really concentrate on it. And it's, to me, when it's done well, it's so beautiful, and it has such a like almost a. It feels like eating a poem. You know, it's really it's complicated, and so
Quite delicate, right?
it's very delicate. And so these are things that I try to introduce to Americans, and they get. I love it when I see like an American person eat at Chia, and their face lights up, and they go, "Oh, this is really interesting." And I'm like, "Yeah, like this is like, you know, we do dessert with injolmi, you know, and it's like this is a very Korean flavor to me when you have injolmi. Like it's a little bitter, it's a little, you know, gentle, it's a little nutty, it's a soft. So those are things that I'm exploring right now.
I want to get to your restaurant, Shiat, in Washington in just a bit, but let's go back a little bit, and I want to talk about maybe your personal journey that brought you to Shiat and you exploring even the 담백한 맛. You were born in Korea, but you moved to the U.S. when you were just 6 months old.
Yes.
You grew up in Brooklyn in an immigrant-heavy neighborhood. And you said that it was your grandmother who influenced you from a very young age. You even said your mother wasn't a very good cook, but your grandmother was. And in an interview with Maekyung, you said that one of your soul foods is just eating a bowl of white rice with your grandmother's 깍두기. Yeah. Is that still your favorite food that you kind of crave after a long day? Because it's very different from the 담백한 거, but I don't know, is it the memory?
But you know what's funny? I don't eat a lot of 깍두기.
You don't eat a lot of 깍두기 now?
No, because every time I have it, it's disappointing me.
You compare
because I compare it to my grandmother, and then it reminds me of my grandmother, and then I want to eat my grandmother's food, and I miss it. So I don't eat a lot of it because it's something that we used to eat it every day, and I think most people know, like, you don't eat kalbi every day. When I was young, kalbi was like a special occasion, right? We ate very simply, so it was like rice, 깍두기, and 장조림. that was dinner, and so those are things that have such a strong memory for me. So unless it's like really good 깍두기, I usually don't eat too much of it. But I think about. You know, my grandmother died before I became a famous chef. So she knew I wanted to be a chef, but she didn't see it. So I think about her a lot. And whenever I'm in Korea, I think about her a lot because I think about, you know, what kind of life she had here. You know, what are the things that she did here. You know, the neighborhood that she lived in doesn't exist anymore, right? So it's a lot of history has, you know, become forgotten. And so I think about her a lot. I think about, you know, what kind of life she had here and how she had to leave her life to come to America. It was very, very difficult for her. And so those things always stay with me.
I wonder if coming to Korea so often also makes you think of your father, who sadly passed away. But you mentioned in the book and in several interviews that he was disappointed with your decision. I think that's not a surprise for most maybe Korean fathers who would not want their child to go into cooking. Things may have changed now, but you said that he never even stepped inside your restaurants. But if he saw you today on this stage, being so warmly welcomed by Koreans and introducing Korean food, you're a Korean ambassador basically for Korean food. How do you think he would feel now?
I think he would be very proud. I'm sure he would be very proud. I'm sure he's somewhere looking, but he's also very stubborn. So you never know. He might have just been like, ugh. But I think, you know, his you know, hesitance was really because he cared and he didn't want me to be poor, you know, and he didn't want me to suffer, and you know, back then there was really not this idea of celebrity chef, and it was a very hard. It still is a hard life, you know, and so he was worried about me all the time, and I think that's part of the strain that we had in our relationship. But he was a very good person, and he cared a lot. And I think that he is somewhere watching me.
I'm sure he is, and I know that your mother is very proud of you as well. To go back into a little bit of your personal history, again, after you were raised in Brooklyn, you graduated from NYU, majoring in English literature, which is probably some of the reason why you write so beautifully. You wanted to be a chef, but your parents sort of guided you to university, but you pursued a career in cuisine anyways. You had a successful restaurant at the age of 25 in New York called Clay, and then you gave it all up. 9/11 happened, of course, but you gave it up and you moved to Kentucky, which is another trajectory I think that most people, especially maybe a lot of Koreans, would not understand. Kentucky being in the deep south, not a place where maybe a lot of Koreans are. Why would you give up what was quite a lucrative career in New York and move all the way to Kentucky?
You know, it was definitely a strange decision, and my goal was not to stay in Kentucky for 20 years. I only wanted to stay for a little bit. By the way, there's actually a lot of Koreans in Kentucky, and not far is Atlanta, and there's a lot of Koreans in Atlanta. So I think when I moved to Kentucky, it actually brought me closer to my Korean food in a way, because two things. In New York, it was so easy to get Korean food because it's everywhere. So anytime I had a craving for Korean food, I would just go to K-Town or go to a restaurant or go to H Mart and buy Korean food. Then I moved to Kentucky, and there's no Korean food. There's like one. Back then, now there's a lot, but there was one Korean restaurant. And so when I wanted Korean food, I had to cook it myself. And so that forced me to cook and understand and just sometimes with cooking, you just have to do the physical motion of marinating and doing those things. And I never really cooked Korean food. Like before, I would cook Korean food as a chef and make recipes, but I never cooked Korean food in my house for myself. And it's a very different kind of cooking. And I would cook for my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I would cook Korean food for my friends. I never did that in my whole life before. And that brought me much closer to Korean food than I ever thought about. The other thing that happens is New York everything is about innovation. Everything moves very fast. Everything is about what's new, and then I moved to Kentucky, and everything is very old, and everything is very traditional, and everything is very slow. And they talk a lot about my grandmother's recipe, and my aunt's pie recipe. And I understood for the first time what it means to have recipes passed on from generations. Like, this is not just a recipe that I got from a book. This is something my mother taught me, and my grandmother taught her, and my great-grandmother taught her. And that was really eye-opening for me because I understood, like, oh my God, there's so many people in the South that understand tradition and have so much respect for tradition. And it made me start to think about, well, when I have a child, and now I have a child, what do I pass on to her about my Korean heritage? And at the time when I was living in Kentucky, some ways I was very ashamed because I was like, I don't have much of the Korean culture to pass on to my child. And I felt responsible for trying to connect and learn because for me, it's a very important thing, and it's a very sad thing to lose if I lose it. So in many ways, my journey here to Korea, I had to go to Kentucky first and understand another culture's history and cuisine, and then to come to my own.
That's a lovely sort of tale of how it took you. And I was also interested in how your sort of detour maybe, or to Kentucky, allowed you to really flourish, not only to connect with your Korean identity, but it allowed you to flourish as a chef in a way that you might not have had the chance in New York, where the pace, the pressure, the financial cost is, everything is just higher. So I think maybe for some, we have students up on the second floor. Being a chef now is very much sort of a kind of aspiring job or profession for Koreans. What sort of advice would you give for aspiring chefs? Because in the land or in this era where everything is on Insta, everything is reviewed. What kind of advice?
And it's hard. Believe it or not, I started being a chef in a time where there was no Facebook and no social media. So I had to learn recipes through books and travel and going to other restaurants. I think it's important. When I first moved to Kentucky, it was very, I was in New York and I had a little bit of a name, but I wasn't very famous, but I had a little bit of a name because my restaurant had gotten good reviews. And it was like I disappeared. And everyone said, "What happened to him? He's completely disappeared." And I got to have like almost 2 years in Kentucky cooking by myself, nobody watching me. Nobody knew where I was, nobody knew what I was doing, and I was kind of free from criticism. So I was able to make mistakes, I was able to explore, take risks, and do things that sometimes I think now younger chefs have a hard time doing, because if they make a mistake, oh my God, it's going to be on Instagram and everyone's going to see it, and 너무 창피해. So sometimes I try to tell my younger chefs, it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. When we make mistakes, that's how we learn fastest. So you have to take a risk and make a mistake, fall down, get up, and then keep going. Not every day is going to be successful. Not every restaurant's going to be successful. It's okay. And sometimes I feel a little sad for the younger generations, because social media makes everything, like all over the world, it's so instant and so fast. And I think sometimes we have to slow down and not worry about what other people are thinking and saying, and just like, find our own voice, and that's hard. I think for me, cooking is, you spend many years training, cooking someone else's food, learning, reading, exploring, and then there's a point, like any art form, where you have to stop learning and then just start exploring inside yourself and try to find your voice. That is the hardest thing to do in the world, is to be vulnerable and put your own words or flavors or anything on a plate, and then have the public judge you, and it's very scary. It's still, to me, it's very scary. Every time I put a new dish on the menu and I put it out, I still, to this day, I think, oh, what if people hate the food? What if they don't like me? It's like, it's a lot of stress, but I enjoy it. But it's still very, very scary. I enjoy the scariness of it, though. It's what keeps me going. But I think for a lot of young chefs, I try to say, don't worry about failing. Don't worry about making a mistake. Mistakes are good.
Okay. Well, we have about 7 minutes left, and I know that we have mics ready, so if you have any questions from the audience, if you would like to raise your hand, yes, our staff will come at you with a mic.
I'm calling people, it's not mine.
Hi, Mr. Lee, chef.
Hello.
As a chef, what do you think is the most valuable thing?
As a chef?
Yes.
The most valuable? That's a big question. To me, I think is really the most important thing is patience. You know, I've been a chef for now 35 years, and I'm 53. And you know, I've had success throughout my career, and now you know I have this other level of success. There are many times in my life that I wanted to quit my job and to quit my career. There were many times when I was making, you know, I was, what is that? I think I was 42, and we had a big recession in America, and I was making no money, and I wanted to quit. And there were many times when, you know, my daughter was born, and I wanted to be home with her every night, but I had to go to the restaurant every night, and I missed so many nights with my daughter, and I wanted to quit. And there are so many times when, during COVID, right, and I wanted to quit. And I think, and again, because of social media and everything, we always want success to happen so fast. And I think for a chef, it is a very long road. And I just teach all of my younger chefs, have patience, be patient. Don't worry about instant success. If you keep going, I guarantee you will have some success. But you have to be patient, and that's the hardest thing, you know. It was very difficult for me because I was in my early 40s. I had no money, and it was very, very difficult. But it's important if you love what you do, to keep going. So
And make lots of mistakes. That's how
and
you
make
learn.
mistakes. Not too many mistakes, but some.
I think we have some more questions in the back. If you can raise your hand, yes.
Hi, sir. As being a star chef, like you had a job that's being rated all the time, right? And I have a job that's being rated all the time. I'm actually a singer.
Oh,
Then, like,
nice.
always, you said you always overcome the fear and enjoy the scareness. Like, you have a tips to overcome itself.
Yeah, don't listen to people. I know it's hard. It's easy to say. It's hard to do. It's funny. We have, you know, because Shia has a new restaurant, right? So we got a food review in the newspaper, and my manager said, "Oh, we got a great review in the newspaper. You should read it." And I said, "I can't read it." And he said, "What do you care?" I said, "I never read a review in my whole life." Because chefs do this, and most artists do the same thing. If it's a good review, you say, that writer is a genius. But if it's a bad review, you say, that writer's an idiot. You can't do that. So if I read the good review, then I have to read the bad review too. I choose not to read any of it. I don't want to read the online reviews. I don't read journalist reviews. I don't read any of it because I have to have my own inner confidence. So the only person I'm trying to impress is myself. And so I put a very high standard on myself, and I'm always disappointed in my performance. That's why I keep pushing myself. But I'm never too disappointed where I give up. I just know I can do better. And I think that's important if, you know, yes, I listen to my wife, you know, and I listen to some friends. But if you listen to too many people, it makes you very confused. And I think it's important to just trust your own confidence.
Well, thank you very much for your questions. I think that will have to do it for us. Would you please give another big round of applause to Chef Edward Lee?
Thank you. 감사합니다.
Thank you.